This is your lecture about the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic begins roughly in 509 when they overthrow their Etruscan king and establish a republic. It's an oligarchy, which means it's a government by aristocrats. They become enormously successful with their military, including conquering Greece in the year 146, bringing an influx of artwork and artists. And talking about Rome's relationship with Greece, the historian Horace says that captive Greece conquered her savage conquerors and brought the arts to rustic Latium. So basically, even though Greece was the one captured, they capture the Romans with their culture. You see this in their religion. They assimilate Greek gods. However, there's also this aspect of being devoted to the Roman state and ancestor worship. Roman Republican artwork in general is very eclectic. It incorporates all sorts of different styles, but you can trace a consistent interest in maintaining its Etruscan roots. So here's a map of where we're heading. In this lecture, we're primarily focusing just on Rome, but you can see here that over the course of this period, the Romans conquer most of the Mediterranean world and well into Europe, up so far as to Scotland in the United Kingdom. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about context. The Roman Republican government has its power in the Senate. The Senate literally means Council of Elders and then 2 elected consuls. If you were to be a member of the Senate, you have to come from the patrician class of wealthy landowners. If you're not a patrician, you're a plebeian. That's the lower class. And there is a provision within the Republican government that a dictator can be appointed in time of crisis, and we'll see how that kind of gets him in trouble as we move into the imperial period. Anyway, so what we're looking at here is a head of a Roman patrician, and when you look at this, it really doesn't look anything like what we've talked about so far, right? Is he idealized? No, not in the least. He is like so ridiculously wrinkled that it's shocking. When you see the scar on his face up here, you can see his sunken cheeks down here. It looks like he's missing teeth. His wrinkly neck, his giant ears, his giant nose. The artist really didn't spare any details here in exaggerating all of the things that are old about this guy. And why are they going to do this? Well, it's because you have to be old to be a leader in the Roman Republic, right? And so if age equals authority, then you're going to celebrate age. And just as a little random aside, does anybody else think he really looks like Mike from Breaking Bad? Maybe? All right, here's another one. So these portrait heads of men, old men, are very important in Roman Republican life. The style is called veristic, meaning that it's true to natural appearance. These may have been based on death masks. So basically they would take wax and cover the face of the deceased to get an impression of what the face looked like and then use that as the basis for the sculpture. But these are important because they also relate to the ancestor worship that is a vital part of Roman religious life. So in a Roman home, there will be small altars or boxes set up on the wall, and you would put these portraits in there, these portrait heads. And so in your home, you would be surrounded by very veristic representation of your deceased elders. And this is a way of remembering your lineage, celebrating your aristocratic authority, and perhaps thinking about the power that your family holds within the Senate. Because of course, this is only going to be patricians that have these things. So this is a death mask, and it gives you a sense of why scholars think that the marble portrait heads might be based on that. This is of the artist Filippo Brunelleschi, but you can see all of the things like the indented cheeks and the oversized nose. All of those things get recorded. This sculpture is interesting because it shows you another way that these portrait heads were used. So When they weren't in a box in your living room, you would bring them out to parade during a funeral procession. So when somebody died, you would bring out all of the ancestors, all of the heads, and kind of parade them. And it's a way of demonstrating your family's heritage. It was really important to have these. There's an anecdote about a general who rose up very far within the army of Rome, but he was ridiculed because they said he doesn't have any portrait heads, basically. He has no ancestors. He's not really a patrician, even though he's an awesome military leader. This is another example of Roman Republican sculpture. This is a bronze piece, and you can see that it does a lot of the things that we talked about bronzes being able to achieve back in the classical Greek period. So he has this long extended arm lifting up in what's called the orator's pose. So it looks like he's about to say something, make a grand announcement. He is not idealized, right? Look at, he's got wrinkly forehead, kind of wrinkly neck. He looks old. He's got wrinkles. He's not as old as the other guys were, but again, you see that they're not shying away from depicting an elderly man, and that is so different from what we saw in Greece. Here's a close-up on him where you can see even more the way that the artist is completely fine with including the deep wrinkles here and here. And this even goes so far as to include representations of Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar declares himself, is declared the dictator, and then eventually he says that he's dictator for life. And he even goes so far as to put his own face on the Roman coins, which at the time was just like seen as completely appalling. What's interesting about this, though, is he's emphasizing, again, his age. Look at the wrinkles in his neck. Look at the wrinkles in his forehead, his sunken eyes, the receding hairline. All of these things suggest a real interest in incorporating these visual ideas of what it means to be a leader, even if they aren't the idealized versions of leadership that they were getting from Greece. The last thing I want to talk about is the architectural revolution that happens during the Roman Republican period. A lot of why they're so successful is because of their architectural capacities. They invent the first system of interior space that can accommodate large crowds, and in a huge empire like what they're building, large public buildings are important. And how do they do this? They do it with concrete. So they invent concrete, which is a mixture of lime mortar, volcanic sand, water, and small stones. You can vary the recipe so that it's heavier or lighter, meaning that as you get farther up, you can make it lighter, and so you can span these large spaces with an actual concrete roof. It is poured into wooden frames, which are then removed after the concrete dries, and in a fancier home, it's covered with marble or tile or mosaic. So they take this new building material and they combine it with arches and vault construction to make these huge interior spaces. So this is a good slide for talking about the different terms of architecture. This is an arcade. An arcade is a succession of arches, and each one of these arches is a bay. And so you can see that this part right here is called the piers. These are the arches that go over it. The space in here is called the spandrel. There's a keystone, and these individual things are called voussoirs. And this gives you a sense of the type of wooden frame they would use to center it. This is an example of how they use concrete to build vaults. So the wooden frames that surround these were then filled with concrete, and once it dried, you remove the wooden frame, and voila, you have these towering barrel vaults. So this is called a barrel vault because it looks like it's half of a barrel. If you put two barrel vaults together at a 90-degree angle, you get a groin vault. If you open up this part, you get a fenestrated sequence of groin vaults. And then if you take a barrel vault and rotate it 360 degrees, you get a hemispherical dome. So these are all types of construction that we'll be looking at, especially in the Roman imperial period.